Before we get started, just a quick note, spoiler alert.
And we are adults, and I will try very hard not to use adult language, but this is the warning.
Hello! Welcome to the first official episode of Last Library on the Left. My name is Jennifer.
And I'm Sadina. We're a horror review and discussion podcast where we talk about horror in books, movies, and other formats, why we seek it out, and why we need it in our lives.
So today's episode is about The Haunting of Hill House. I'll be starting things off by talking to you about the book, The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, which was published by the Penguin Group in 1959.
And I will take over by talking about the movie adaptations and remake. The first was 1963, directed by Robert Wise, starring Julie Harris and Claire Bloom. The remake was made in 1999, directed by Jan DeBont, starring Lily Taylor and Catherine Zeta-Jones. The recent Netflix adaptation was developed in 2018, which took us by surprise because we legit thought it was 2020.
We sure did.
Y'all, this year has been a lot. So we looked it up, and it was 2018,
yes.
Created and directed by Mike Flanagan. And we will discuss the cast as it pertains to the segment when we discuss it a little bit later in the podcast.
Yes, because we'll be spending a lot more time on that one for sure. So before we get started on even talking about The Haunting of Hill House, I want to give you a brief summary. Basically, what's happening is we meet Dr. Montague. He has reached out to about a dozen people to have them come and spend the night at Hill House because he's interested in recording scientifically what goes on within Hill House after hearing about the spiritual parties that happen in places like Winchester House. So he's reached out to about a dozen people. Only 2 show up, and a family member of Hill House show up. We meet Eleanor, who's our main character, Theodora, and we also meet Luke, who is the family member. He's a descendant of the Sandersons, who are the original owners of Hill House. And as we go through the book, we find that Eleanor has, she spent most of her life taking care of her mother. She's living with her sister when she receives a letter to visit Hill House. And for her, it's almost like embarking on a new adventure. And it's her way of making her own choices and taking control of her life. So she's very excited, and she feels like Hill House is fate almost. Theodora is very unreliable, and when she gets the letter, she's just like, it's something to do. She got in a fight with her roommate, and so she's like, I'm going.
I mean, I feel that.
but that's Theodora. And Luke is the family drunk. The first sentence that we get to hear when we find out about Luke is a liar. So Luke is just being sent there on his family's behalf just because he's expendable, I would say.
Okay, that makes more sense, because when you said that he's a liar and that he's being sent on their behalf, I was like, that seems like a poor representative for the family. But if they're kind of like, here, go do the thing that's terrible because we don't like you, okay.
Right. You know, there are rumors about Hill House. When Eleanor goes into the town right before she reaches Hill House, she's warned by the townsfolk to, leave. No one really stays at Hill House. They leave Hill House. But she's met with a little bit of apprehension and anxiety, but she still goes. She's hell-bent on being in Hill House and having this adventure and this journey that she just wants to be on of her own volition. Not so much with Theodora. Theodora's just kind of day by day, I'm just here, you know. And of course Luke is just there. He's supposed to be there, so he's there. As you get into their encounters with each other, you kind of realize that they're not really telling each other the truth. They're kind of lying about their backgrounds and stuff. Eleanor, who, like I said before, she took care of her mother. She lives with her sister now. She tells the folk that she lives on her own in a nice little quaint apartment. Theodora, you don't really get to know what she's done. You know she has a roommate, but she doesn't tell you if it's like a companion. You just don't know about her. Luke, we don't really get much about him at all. You just know that he's the family.
Right, and he's a liar.
Yeah.
So, if we got anything from him, it probably would be not great.
Right. And Dr. Montague is just there, and he's kind of guiding them, telling them, guys, just take notes. I just want to know what is happening while you're in your rooms, while you're outside and discovering things. We also meet 2 additional characters, Mr. and Mrs. Dudley. They are the caretakers of the house. Mrs. Dudley is very adamant in telling the visitors that she has breakfast out at a certain time, she has lunch out at a certain time, dinner is on the table at a certain time. They have to eat so that she can have the dishes back on the shelves by a specific time. daytime. She tells them that she will not be there to help them at night. Once the sun goes down, she is gone.
Very militant.
Yeah. And, you can't really engage her in conversation because she just, lunch is served at 1. I'm out of here by 5. Like, she's very much like a robot, and she repeats the same lines over and over again.
Sounds like my papa, where, like, when I was a kid, he was like, all right, like, you eat when we eat, and then we're not a buffet, we're closed.
Yeah, that's Mrs. Dudley, for sure. So now as we go through their experience in Hill House, you get some kind of mini hints. One of the things that I really loved about this book is it stuck to the classic, the chill in the air when something was about to happen. They would get cold. And it happened early on back in, I want to say page 39, when they're just kind of out and about discovering the grounds, and Theodora and Eleanor are just at the pond, and they sort of see something out of the corner of their eye, but they really, you get the sense that they're cold. Eleanor can't be sure what she saw. Theodora knows what she saw. We don't know as the reader what she saw, but she tells us that it was a rabbit. But they immediately go back inside.
Interesting.
One of the things that I failed to mention earlier was when Dr. Montague reached out to the dozen people, they were all people that had some sort of experience with the paranormal. For instance, Eleanor, when her dad died, I want to say almost right after, there was an incident in her house where stones were falling on top of the house, and it seemed like it was caused by Eleanor. Eleanor has since blocked that out of her memory. Theodora, she was part of a science experiment where they had flashcards, and she would guess the flashcards before they were up for her to read them. So she would know exactly what was coming beforehand. And Luke, again, we don't know much about Luke. Like, he's just
the drunk.
Yeah, and he's just like a static character throughout this whole book. So as we go through, you get your hauntings, and
wait, does that mean that Luke doesn't really experience anything? Because it sounds like Luke is the one you base the meter for what is considered haunting versus not.
Luke doesn't experience any hauntings, neither does Dr. Montague. It's all Theodora and Eleanor. With the heavy emphasis on Eleanor, because at first she kind of sees things and hears things, and Theodora knows right off the bat what's happening because, like I said, she's attuned to that realm of spirits, whereas Eleanor is kind of not. And as they progress, you notice that the spirits in the house want Eleanor. Like I said, Luke and the doctor, they're really not there. They're there for dinner, they're there for after night drinks, but they usually don't experience any type of haunting except that they hear that the girls are experiencing something, so they come almost to like the rescue.
Oh, yeah.
Right? But they don't see anything, and they don't really help, to be honest. They just, oh, this happened. Are you guys okay? What? Write it down, So there's really no, they don't really play a part into the hauntings. It's really Eleanor who's being consumed by the house. The house really wants her. And Eleanor, like I said, she was apprehensive about this trip, but she's always saying a journey ends when two lovers meet. And you kind of get the sense that she's one of the lovers and the house is the other lover. She feels this pull with the house. It calls to her, and Theodora tries her best to kind of like, I don't want to say pull her away from it, but kind of keep her feet on the ground almost. And Eleanor is she's so consumed with the house. Eventually, she sees it as they need her, and she's got this caretaker complex, so she wants to help take care of whoever is in the house. But she doesn't know who it is. We never once see any type of shadow. You don't really see any
apparition.
No apparitions, no mention of ghosts. The blinds move and the curtains move, and one of the things that they mentioned that I really liked is you think you see something and you're looking at it straight on, but you're not seeing anything. Then you turn your head, and out of the corner of your eye you catch something. And there's a lot of that's in the book. Towards the end, though, Eleanor is starting to hear someone talking to her. It sounds like children, and they want to be taken care of.
Ugh.
Which, that's very cringy.
Guys, it's never kids.
It's never kids.
It's never kids.
And, she hears them and she's like, I want to take care of them because that's who she is. She's a caretaker. She has been her whole life. But then as she progresses, it's her mom that she feels is in the house, and she wants to be with her mom because she's still grieving the loss of her mother.
Yeah, because she got the letter shortly after her mother passed.
Yeah, shortly after. Like, they had just sold a lot of the mom's things, and, you know, they were still in the grieving process. So, you know, she envisions her mom in the house, and she feels loved by the house almost. So she wants to stay in Hill House. Dr. Montague eventually realizes that it's not healthy for her. She needs to be away from Hill House. So the last couple pages of the book, Dr. Montague, Luke, and Theodora are all trying to get her out of the house. She doesn't want to go. She tells you, I should be here. My place is here. And again, the line, a journey ends in two lovers meeting, keeps coming up. As she's leaving, Eleanor, they finally convince her to leave. She's in the car. She's on her way out. And she's like, I can't leave. I can't leave. And she crashes into a tree. And she's dead.
So I know that everybody's like kind of telling their own story to Dr. Montague and each other. Does she at any point tell them that she recently lost her mother?
Yes, they all know that she lost her mom.
Okay.
But the way she makes it seem is almost like, you know, she lost her mom, she took care of her mom, but she's not suffering from any kind of like PTSD or she's not suffering from any type of grief.
She's already passed like the 7 stages or whatever.
Right, yeah. It's almost like she, you know, her mom passed, she's made her amends with it, made her peace with it, and she's moving forward.
You know, that makes me wonder then, you definitely can tell that the house is a separate entity, whether it's being haunted itself or has become an entity separate. I wonder if then the house has been listening, she's been lying about not grieving her mother, and that's how the house lured her in. It took on her mother's voice, and because it started out with kids. Yeah. So it was trying to latch onto her caretaker persona. Yeah. But it sounds like that didn't maybe get her fully latched in. Yeah. So it went with like her mother. And so maybe the house was listening and was trying to find the best hook to get Eleanor to stay at the house.
Yes, because there are moments where she bought like a red sweater and very scandalous, you know, like because mom wouldn't approve.
1950s guys.
Yeah.
Remember.
So she has this red sweater and she's talking about how she bought it and mom wouldn't approve, and you know, she wants to put it on, but mom wouldn't approve. And she's talking to herself. And so I'm sure, the house is listening to her and ingesting what she's saying and using it against her so that she, you know, because they realize she's easy to feed off of.
Right. It would make more sense because her mom didn't pass at the house. Right. It's like there's no reason for her mother to actually be there enticing her to stay. Yeah, that's interesting that the house like actively listened for the weakest point in Eleanor as the weakest link to get her to stay.
Yeah, because even like Theodora would see things, she'd know that things are happening, but really in her mindset, it's something that's happening, but it's not like the main thing, you know? She just, like, at one point, her room was haunted, and she was more upset about the fact that her clothes were messed up. And that she was being haunted, you know?
Interesting.
So Theodora's just a different person.
Interesting.
And, you know, I think the house realized that they could try with Theodora, but they really wouldn't get anywhere. But with Eleanor, there's a way to kind of pick through and get to her.
Interesting.
It was a really great read. As someone who just read it for the first time and has only experienced Hill House through the film adaptations and the show, I really enjoyed taking a look back at sort of like the origin story, if you will, and seeing how Eleanor has evolved over the years, which we'll talk about as we go through the media, because it's really fascinating to go back and see her origin story. And like, they really keep a lot of aspects of Eleanor in all of the media, it seems like.
And with that, we'll go ahead and start talking about the movie adaptations, but continue to sort of touch back on the book as we move forward, which is sort of one of the interesting things about Hill House, how it's evolved and been adapted, but also how it's evolved as a cultural experience. Yeah. And we'll get into all of that. That's interesting about the house. What a creep. Yeah. Like listening. Okay, anyway. So now we are going to talk about I will talk about the movie adaptations. Talking about the first movie, I watched this many, many years ago for the first time when me and my mom and my baby sister, we were at Blockbuster. For those of you who do not know what Blockbuster is, it was Netflix before Netflix. Like it was a movie rental place, and my family went every Friday. Yeah. Our thing was to go every Friday, and sometimes my mom would get overexcited about a movie from her childhood and demand that we watched it. Usually they were great. Rocky Horror Picture Show, great. Yeah. I mean, maybe I didn't fully understand it at like 8 years old,
but great time to watch it.
But great time to watch it because like Ugh, what a great musical.
Yes.
Anyway, it must have been when the Haunting 1999 film came out in Blockbuster, which, I just realized maybe that's why I didn't realize it came out so late in the 90s, was because it felt like it came out in the noughts. Because back then it took forever for something to go to DVD.
Right, yeah. I mean, you waited for like at least a year, I would think, right? God, I can't remember.
it took so long.
It took so long.
It must have been on an end cap, and I wanted to watch that, but Blockbuster had put the 1963 version next to it, and my mom was like, okay, well, if we're going to watch one, we have to watch both.
Right.
So we took both home, watched the 1999 one first, which I'll talk about after, and then 1963, my mom sort of hyped it up. She let me know that it was 1963. My mom would have been, she was 10 years old.
Oh my god.
Maybe.
Yeah.
And okay, now I feel a little bad for teasing her about how scared she was.
Oh yeah, I can understand why she's scared as a 10-year-old watching it. Yes.
In the theater too, which I can't ask now as she's passed away, but I wonder if that means that my uncle took her because he was older.
Yeah.
Because I don't see my bubby and papa having taken my 10-year-old mother.
Yeah, it had to have been uncle.
Yeah, it had to have been.
Hands down, yeah.
So as a 10-year-old, my mom went and saw the 1963 adaptation in the theater. It was in black and white, but she hyped it up before I watched it and just told me just how terrifying it was. It was the first like true horror experience she had ever had, which now that I know that she was 10 makes way more sense.
It does. Oh my gosh.
Like, so much more.
Poor mom.
I'm sorry, Mom. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
But yeah, she sounded as if it was just, I think she even said she didn't go to the theater after that for like a few years.
Wow.
She was so shook up over it that just being like in the dark, in the theater, in that experience really, rocked her. Which is why she probably missed The Exorcist. Mm-hmm. She definitely did not see that in the theater, guys. So,
when she watched it, did they show, like, and I'm probably jumping ahead, but did they show anything as far as, like, hauntings go?
Not really. I think the adaptation was closer to the book than any of the other remakes since, which I didn't know because I didn't read the book.
Right.
And so I watched the 1963 adaptation with the only reference as the 1999 movie.
Right, and they're completely different.
Completely different because it lacked any of the horror tropes and jumps that I had sort of grown to expect, But I definitely grown up learning that, certain soundtracks are precursors to jump scares, and jump scares were a thing.
Yes, it was so big back then.
Yes, and the 1963 film lacked all of it. I am very sorry for all of that knocking you just heard. That was my cat Chainsaw coming out of the blinds because he's been hanging out in the window. If you hear him crying at any point, it's because it's his nap time. Yeah. So I apologize. So in 1963, the book was adapted, and looking back on it now, I definitely appreciate it more. The scariest parts were the discussions of the hauntings, of what had happened.
Okay.
So it's interesting that you said that in the book, the guys experienced the hauntings through what the girls basically updated them on.
Right, yes. Mm-hmm.
Which, yeah, the movie was sort of that way.
Yeah.
Where something had happened and they were in the parlor and would update their day.
Yeah, in the book, they did spend a lot of time in the parlor. Their mornings and their afternoons were definitely spent in the parlor. And even in the evenings, like after dinner drinks, you know, in the parlor. So yeah, I can see how the movie took that and ran with it.
Compared especially to the Netflix adaptation and the 1999 adaptation. But the most interesting part of the movie for me is that watching the ending as Eleanor is driving down the driveway to escape the house, I interpreted her driving away from the house as this sort of desperate attempt to detach from the house. And as she's driving and she looks in the rearview mirror, it looks as if she hasn't driven at all from the house. It's looming right there in the rearview mirror. And I thought that the surprise that she wasn't detaching from it, that she wasn't actually making any space between it and her, spooked her so bad that she drove off the road and died by accident.
Yeah. Well, in the book, she says, in the book, Theodora, Dr. Montague, and Luke make her leave, and she doesn't want to go. So she says, they don't make the rules around here. They can't turn me out or shut me out or laugh at me or hide from me. I won't go, and Hill House belongs to me. She's not trying to leave Hill House. And so for her, I think driving into the tree is her way of permanently attaching herself to Hill House and defying someone else trying to tell her what to do, because her whole life people have told her what to do.
Interesting. But I'm going to bring up the 0 to 100 thing now, because Eleanor, there are other ways to like make baby steps into seeking freedom in your life.
Right, yeah. she did not hold back. The first taste of freedom she got, she's like, I'm gonna go for it all. Hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah,
no slowing down. 0 to 100.
Yeah, it was, I'm gonna make my own decisions now, so I'll go to a haunted house for a science experiment. That's not what I would have chosen as my first steps into freedom.
Right.
Her next individual choice was, I will die to stay with this house. That's a little much.
And thinking back now, when she made the decision to go to Hill House, her sister and brother-in-law told her not to go. And she was like, I'm going. And she stole, like, the family car to go. So, when it comes to freedom, she can't make some really good choices.
No.
She's not that great at it.
No, she, like, clearly didn't have any, like, baseline to work from.
Yeah, no.
Goodness. Okay. All right, Eleanor. Also, I guess we should think about it in the context of the 1950s.
Right.
And even the 1960s, early 1960s. That this idea that, like, I don't need no man, you can't tell me what to do, and, you know, all this other stuff, I get it. But also, going to a haunted house is not, like, my first step.
I mean, yeah, same. I'll buy the red sweater, but I'm not going to wear it at a haunted house.
Or, I don't know, live by that imaginary life you gave yourself that you were living on your own at the very least.
Right,
like, maybe just live on your own for a little bit. Wow, Eleanor.
It would have been so much healthier for her.
Right. Oh, Eleanor. I mean, I get it.
Yeah.
People make bad choices.
I mean, and she made a ton of them under the guise of wanting to just make base choices for herself, because I guess that had been taken away from her, which I can understand.
So another thing I think I maybe misinterpreted in the ending of her fleeing the house was that I also had gone into a lot of the movie misunderstanding Dr. Montague's motives.
Yeah.
That I often saw a lot of men in black and white movies as like a villain anyway, like tying up the woman on the train tracks.
Right,
and,
yeah.
You know, twisting the little mustache
Yeah.
and stuff. And it was very tropey, and at that age I lived by tropes. That was all I had context for. So maybe that was another reason why I misinterpreted the ending, was because it very much felt like she was fleeing a bad situation.
Yeah.
And that Dr. Montague was also part of that bad situation because he put her in it.
Right.
And it sounds like the book wasn't that at all.
Right, he wasn't as villainous in the book. I mean, definitely for sure he made some bad choices himself by allowing these adults who, I mean, yeah, they made their own choices, but for allowing them to be in here, in this house, making notes about what they experienced. He told them that it was haunted, but not really.
Yeah.
You know, he kind of didn't want to scare them off, and maybe if he would have given them the full explanation of what happened in Hill House, then they could have made a better educated choice.
I wonder if I would have reinterpreted the ending better if I had read the book beforehand. You know, and because I feel like my mom was probably not the best sounding board for that either, because she was so scared when she watched it.
Right.
And she was 10 when she watched it. So, you know, memories are imperfect. I really swear, though, that the movie, the original 1963, played up this idea, because even like the music they use when she's viewing the house in the background sounds so sinister.
Ooh.
Like she's fleeing. And I feel like if it was not meant to be that the house itself was sinister and that she was making her own choices, that the music choice itself would have even been a little different.
Right, yeah.
You know?
It probably would have been more suspenseful, like she's trying her hardest to get away, almost,
And like fruitlessly.
Yeah.
You know, to get away. But in the book it sounds like, well, she made bad choices. She at least made a choice.
Exactly. She made the choice, she knew the consequence of it, and she made it anyway, so...
And I would also like to talk a little bit about that, because I feel like in the book, it sounds like the house using her mother to manipulate her grief maybe worked a bit more towards her making that choice in the end, because I did not get that in the original movie. I did not put two and two together that the house was manipulating her grief at all.
I would really like to watch this movie now. Guys, I've never seen the 60s version, and I think now that I've read the book, I would like to watch it and just see for myself the differences in Dr. Montague.
But also I wonder if part of the waning 50s views on female sexuality and female independence played a bit on Eleanor's characterization.
Yeah.
Because I never, ever would have assumed. In fact, I think I remember asking my mom when I first watched it, that was what frightened you, Mom? Was that the reflection of a house in a rearview mirror as you're fleeing the haunted house is what scared you? And she was like, you just don't understand. Like, that was terrifying.
Right.
I'm like, yeah, you're right. I don't understand.
I mean, I don't. And it makes me wonder if, I mean, going off of a little tangent, I remember the first time I saw the Amityville Horror, you know, they they really played up the sinisterness of the house itself. So I wonder if that was sort of what she took from it, is that the house itself was evil. I think that was a tagline for Amityville. Some houses are just born evil.
Yeah. You know, and the culture of the time, too. You know, my mom being a baby boomer in a time right after World War II when everybody was very, like, Americana and the 2.5 household. My mom's family at that time definitely played into that a bit. I think my papa served in the war, and my bubby stayed home with the kids and raised them, and they were 2.5, I guess. Like, my aunt is a full person now, but she was a baby at one point.
Yeah.
But I wonder if that whole, like, concept and lifestyle also kind of shaped the way that they viewed horror and ingested it.
Oh, so maybe it wasn't technically, like, the scares that got her, but the symbolism behind some of the things. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
If only we could ask her.
I know, I wish we could ask her.
I would like to know, because that's really, I mean, I know there are some times with movies that I do watch, like for instance Get Out, where the symbolism behind it really freaks me out.
Yeah.
And like I can't really watch it. I think I've watched Get Out maybe twice, and I don't know that I will watch it a third time, just because everything behind it really
it's so
gets
stressful.
your mind going. Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that's really what really centered her fear on, was the idea of what Hill House represented at that time.
Yeah. The family falling apart, this haunting, the passing of a parent, like just wow, that was like a very complex view, and for that to
I mean, kudos to her as a 10-year-old for that, you know what I mean? Like...
Yeah. Well, I mean, granted, that type of lifestyle was definitely shoved down their throats. So, interesting. Maybe I could find someone one day to talk about that with. I could ask my uncle. I don't know. And see what he thought.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about all the time the psychology behind horror and how, like, really intriguing it is. Like, I really want to deep dive, like, your mom's brain now and be like, what was she really feeling and thinking? And what really triggered those senses of fear that she felt?
Yeah. She definitely had specific things that really, like, worked her up.
Yeah.
Well, the 1990s remake was entirely different. I mean, not entirely different, but, like, as far as how they approached horror was different. You definitely had the jump scares.
Yeah.
And there was the denial of haunting, but in that way that the corridor scene will always be the scene that I go to first when I think of the 1990s remake, where the curtains, the sort of like tulle curtains, are billowing in the non-existent wind, because I don't believe the windows were open.
Yeah.
And Eleanor is attempting to convince herself that what she's hearing, because she's also hearing children. You
Right.
know? The house is first trying to get her with kids.
Yeah.
And she sees the hand, or like the silhouette, the head of like a small child, but she denies that haunting, which was also my mother's coping mechanism for living in a haunted house. So I feel like it was a lot more denial, active denial. Whereas in the book, it was, you know, things that you saw, Theo knew what she saw.
Yeah, Theo knew exactly what she saw. Eleanor did try to deny it a little bit, but really, when she came into the house, she knew that the house was sinister because she felt like, I need to leave. But she stayed because, like I said, she'd made her choice and she wants to see it through. So that's interesting that Theo always knew what was going on, because I think even in the movie she did too.
Yeah.
And how they correlated those two characters and how Eleanor just kind of ignored it a little bit.
Yeah, I believe in the 1999 one, it was Catherine Zeta-Jones who played Theo.
Yeah.
I always think of her as the main character now, even though she wasn't, because she's Catherine Zeta-Jones.
Yeah.
And so, like, now there's, like, that assumption that she was the main character, but she wasn't. She was Theo.
Yeah.
And she was definitely the stronger
character.
character.
Same thing with the book. She's definitely the stronger of the two females. Yeah.
She was very no-nonsense.
Yeah.
About what was going on. She knew exactly, and there was no gray area. Whereas for Eleanor, everything could be wished away.
Yeah.
You know, like, if you don't talk about it, it doesn't exist. If you don't see it, if you pretend you didn't see it, it didn't exist. Which is not a healthy way to handle hauntings at all. Because then you're kind of gaslighting yourself.
Yeah. And she did that a lot. I feel like she did that a lot in the movie.
And so gaslighting herself, it almost makes that sound like maybe she set herself up for even more. Yeah. For the house to haunt her more.
Because I'm sure the house, like, we talk about the house as its own separate entity, but I think the house knew, and it knew how to manipulate her. Yeah. That's one thing that seems consistent throughout all medias.
True. I mean, I did like the 1999 remake. I did. But I think part of that was because I visually wanted more representations of the haunting. Right, yeah. There's only so much you can be told that a room is cold, or, like, shown the cold breath. Yeah. For that to really shake you up. A child of the 90s, late 80s, you need a bit more to go on. Yes. We see more, and we grew up on
on like the music playing into it, like really playing into it. And so you expect it when they zoom the camera lens just a little bit outside of the center, like you're like, oh, something is about to happen, you know?
Yep, that door frame is now in picture for a reason.
Yeah.
Now I think that kind of plays into the Netflix adaptation because they did a lot of misleading with those tropes.
Yes.
So much.
Yeah, I remember like watching and I'm like, okay, the music is getting dramatic. It's getting dramatic. Something is about to jump out. I'm ready, and nothing.
Yes. And there was one scene in particular where they were in the funeral home, and I believe Shirley was prepping or had just finished prepping the room for the viewing of Nell. They kind of panned a bit to encompass the doorway, the wide doorway into the hall. And so I kept expecting something to come from the doorway.
Yeah.
And it never did.
Yeah.
It heightens your anticipation.
Right. And then you'd look at a scene and there'd be like 3 ghosts in the background just sitting there just, you know, like, oh my God, like, does no one see them there?
Yeah, just chilling out doing their thing. Okay, you done?
Chainsaw has thoughts.
Yeah, okay. Boop. So I think that we've done a good job talking about the book and the movies. So let's really crack into the
meat.
Of the Netflix adaptation.
So before we get started going in depth with the storyline and comparing it with the books and the other movies, we're going to just give you a brief rundown of the characters and the actors who played them.
With the Crane family, we've got Shirley, the oldest sister, played by Elizabeth Reeser. We have Theo, or Theodora, played by Kate Siegel. We have the twins, Luke and Eleanor, or Nell. Luke is played by Oliver Jackson Cohen. Nell is played by Victoria Pedretti. And then we have Stephen, the second oldest, I believe.
I think so.
He was the oldest brother. Michelle Huisman, I apologize. And then we have Olivia, the mom, and Hugh, the dad, the groundskeepers, the Dudleys. There's one other character that we'll talk quite a bit more about, and that's Poppy Hill, who is one of the namesakes of the mansion.
Before we even go any further, I just want to say that I didn't notice it until we started talking about this episode, but Shirley is a character that obviously wasn't in the book, but I think that was just throwback to the author.
Like a nod.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And as you notice, there's a lot of different characters in here that weren't mentioned in the book or previously in any of the movies. So we've got a lot of new characters to discuss, which is really, really fun.
That makes sense because the Netflix adaptation had, 10 episodes?
Yeah.
Something like that.
And I think each episode was focused on a different character, and the character development for all of them was just, phenomenal. Love it.
It really was. I wonder if we hadn't met, because we met Stephen first, right? Him interviewing.
Think so.
So I wonder if we hadn't met him first, if we would have liked him better as a character, because we did not like him.
I don't think, listen, there's probably nothing that would have done anything to make me like him anymore. Just now realizing who the actor was who played him gives him a little bit more like in the area, but no.
Yeah.
I don't like Stephen. Stephen can go somewhere.
Yeah, Stephen, he is just not a likable character.
No.
He's, we'll get into it more in depth, but we're not here for
We're not
Stephen.
crazy about Stephen.
Yeah, he was definitely more of not a rabble rouser per se, but man, he caused a lot more problems than he solved.
Yeah, he definitely did, and he didn't do anything to help that family at all. Not a tiny bit.
No, unless screwing them over.
Yeah, he was definitely drama manifested.
Yeah, because he was one of the more outwardly calm ones, but he was definitely the drama llama of that family.
Yeah, he was. And I think a lot of the issues that they had after they left the house were avoidable if Stephen wasn't in the picture.
Yeah. So playing into that, someone we do like better in the Netflix adaptation is Luke.
Yes, love Luke. When I read about Luke in the book, I was just kind of shocked that he was portrayed as this liar and you couldn't really depend upon him, which you couldn't in the series either, but...
Well, he was just more empathetic as a character.
Right, and as you got into why he was the way he was, you did feel, your heart went out to him and you wanted to help him and you just understood more where he came from, whereas in the book we never got that.
Yeah. The 2 first scenes for him, because there's a first scene of him, his adult actor, and there's a first scene of him as a child.
Yeah.
I believe that in both of them, they create such a deep empathy because the first scene of him as an adult is after he's robbed Stephen.
Yeah.
And they bump into each other in the stairwell.
Yeah.
And he even looks so dejected that he robbed his brother again. Not only has he robbed him and that Stephen knows, but Stephen even offers him more money.
Yeah.
That self-hate on his face, those slumped shoulders.
Yeah.
Because that's a tall dude.
Yeah.
And he pulls himself in real small.
Yeah, he does. And when you go back and they revisit why it wasn't strictly because of this addiction that he has, it's everything that played into it, you really understand why he felt so dejected. Yeah. He just had no other option. And
he plays that very well.
Yeah, they chose some really great actors to portray these characters. I really love this series. Out of all of the media, this is by far my favorite.
Well, the first scene with him as a child is when he's being picked up and ran out of the house by his dad.
Yeah.
That's the first glimpse you get of them being chased down the hallway by who you later find out is their mother, Olivia. That is such a frightening, skeletal looking figure. He's so distressed and all the kids are crying. But that's the first scene you see with him as a kid, and there's so much more empathy built around him as a character. We think maybe that has something to do with the way that alcoholism and addiction is viewed now versus the 1950s.
I think so, yeah. I'm sure back in the 50s it was very much a stigma and you didn't really want to be associated with that. Whereas now you can kind of like unpack it and, you know, figure out what the root is of that alcoholism and really like explore that and help them overcome it.
And while it was not intergenerational in this particular sense, that these days we do understand that there's a cycle built into these issues. And that cycle itself just really lends a lot more empathy to the character.
Yeah.
Understanding that as a mindset, a disease, a cycle, whatever you need to view it as a more modern understanding.
Yeah. With the Netflix series, I think we got more of that adaptation to today's culture and, you know, examining mental health and how it affects us, as opposed to all the previous, the book, the 2 film adaptations. You really didn't get a lot of that.
No, I wonder if that's one of the reasons why they added Shirley and Stephen, because we sort of got different coping mechanisms through all the siblings.
You really did. And I think by doing that, they probably hit a lot of their fan base who have those same coping mechanisms and, you know, really use those in their day-to-day lives.
Yeah, because Shirley, as the oldest, was a very cut and dry move on. This was in the past. And even when she was being actively haunted by Nell, it seemed so abrupt, her way of dealing with it.
She was really good at compartmentalizing everything.
Yes.
She really was. And like, okay, I have to deal with this now. So sorry now. Like, I can't deal with you because I have this viewing of you to deal with.
Right.
And, you
like,
know.
You can scream in my face, but like, I need to move on.
Yeah.
I need to get by this one thing.
Yeah, she was really, really good at compartmentalizing everything and like taking care of the daily stuff that she needed to get through.
Which, if you go from growing up in a, well, not growing up because they were there for a summer, going from a haunted house to having a funeral home.
Yeah. You gotta be able to do that.
That's maybe not the healthiest coping mechanism. But it's definitely very Shirley.
Yeah. She's very much a survivor, I would say. And she's got a lot of that survival instinct in her to be able to put aside things that are really like creeping her out and stuff.
Yeah, and I wonder if as the oldest child she had very type A personality to begin with.
She really did. Oh my god, she really did.
But then couple that with the oldest, especially in light of losing their mom and their dad.
Right, yeah, because dad was gone.
Yeah, dad cut himself out.
Yeah.
Which was also, in a way, his coping mechanism of dealing with everything that had happened. And he thought, for whatever reason, the healthiest way for the kids to deal was to make them lose both their parents.
I know, that makes no sense. That's some Eleanor thinking right there from the book.
Right, and not only losing both their parents, but without explanation.
Yeah. He didn't even try to explain to them anything until it was too late.
Yes.
He'd already lost a child at that point. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, sorry. Chainsaw is once again jumping out of the blinds. Not only he didn't explain, but he sort of allowed them to maybe not believe, because I don't believe any of the kids actually bought in that he killed their mother.
Right.
But he allowed them to live in a world that believed their father killed their mother, which is not a great way to live.
No. Because what does that do to you as a child when you think about that? You know, you have this memory of your dad taking you out of the house, leaving mom behind, because they didn't really know. And then now you think this about dad, and you're like, oh my gosh, who were my parents growing up? Really, who were they?
Yeah. Which is a hard enough thing to come to terms with as a young adult, to see your parents as the people that they were versus the parents you thought they were. But to add like mental instability and haunting and abandonment and possible murder charges.
Right.
Like, that is some heavy stuff
and
to
still
assume.
Still try to raise yourself.
Right. And then that's a lot of heavy stuff to place on a child, and then assume that's the best future you can give them.
And when he finally did decide to make smart decisions, it was too late.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Let's talk about the mom then for a bit. Poor Olivia. She really was a great mom.
Yeah.
But that house got her bad.
It got her really bad. And I think he knew that it was getting to her, just like he did with the kids. He just kind of wanted to ignore it and not really deal with it because because maybe he didn't know how to deal with. They hinted that this kind of stuff has happened before, that she's, you know, crossed the plains and stuff.
Right.
So I wonder if he just wanted to let her take the lead on it. But at what point do you see her struggling and, hey, we got to get you out of the house?
Well,
you know?
not only struggling, but losing herself.
Yeah.
There was a scene when they were in bed together for the night, and like one of her migraines kicked in, and she very clearly was not herself.
No. She was always so very gentle with the kids, and when that would happen, she'd be really like mean with them and like really harsh. And for just, you know, watching it, you would think that, one, I know she recognizes that later on she recognizes that she was harsh with them and that it was the effects of what she was dealing with. But like, how is it that dad can't see that? And, you know, guys, like, you know, she didn't mean it, but also, hey, babe, let's take a break from the house for a little and see how that affects you.
He does try to get her to leave. You know,
he does.
And she
doesn't
go. She comes back. We keep saying that the house was getting to her, but, you know, when I think about it, the house haunted the family, but the person who truly haunted Olivia was Poppy.
Yeah.
Poppy Hill is the wife that the original Hill House owner met when they were both in a psych ward. So, you know, that's a great start.
What a great intro story.
Right. That they met and fell in love in an insane asylum. So cool. Which, I mean, in all fairness, insane asylums back in this would have been 1920s-ish, 30s for them, weren't great as far as sanatoriums went. But Poppy was clearly unstable.
Yeah.
I think they tried making it sound as if she was put in the asylum initially as like just being a rambunctious girl of the flapper era.
Right. Because they put you in insane asylums for anything back in those days.
Exactly. You know, a woman who didn't want to have kids or whatever it was. You know, like there's all sorts of reasons that people got put in asylums back then. It was crazy.
Yeah.
So it almost seemed when they first started telling Poppy's story that maybe she was there for nothing other than like having the vapors.
Yeah, the vapors.
You know? Because I believe the husband was in for something that was fairly minor too.
I think so.
It was like he was just kind of like the oddball in the family.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh my god, I would have been put in there because I'm the oddball in my family.
Girl, same.
I can't.
Yeah, it's
they just have to love us no matter what and deal with it.
Which back then was not the case, because Poppy, they definitely misled her level of instability. Or maybe her instability really came to a head after what happened with the kids. The kids dying, she killed her kids. This whole like weird idea, obsessive idea that she put in Olivia's head.
Yes, about protecting the kids and for their benefit. And oh my god.
Like that was some next level insanity.
Yeah, you said it right, next level. Because never in my life would I imagine that was the direction that they were going to take it into.
Right.
You know?
I've got some instability on my father's side of the family, and there's people there, and by people, I mean one. But there's one there who has genuinely made terrible life decisions.
Yeah.
And then has come back and told me that I wouldn't understand because I don't understand how the real world works, or I don't understand like how adults' decisions are made, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, but you made like we're not going to talk about it
right
now, but like guys, just know they were not real life adult decisions.
Right, yeah. That's another coping mechanism right there.
So to have Poppy sort of have this mindset that the outside world was the most dangerous place for her children, and that having them inside of the house but dead was the best way to protect them, it's just like bananas.
That's some backwards thinking if I ever heard it. Because I mean, you always want the best for your kids. You know, why would that be the best for them?
Yeah, I would assume that the best baseline for them would be, I don't know, breathing?
Yeah!
That would be great, just to have them be alive.
Yeah, and I know you would miss them, you know, but not enough to
harm them.
Yeah, just let them live their life and go on and do great things. And for her to impress that upon Olivia is, oh gosh, she was so demented, that Poppy. She really was really demented, and I hated when they interacted. I just felt bad for Olivia because you could see in her eyes she's working through what Poppy is telling her, and she's thinking in the best interest of her kids, and she's getting confused.
Yeah.
And she's getting roped into that way of thinking. And so she goes out for her kids.
Yeah.
And it's just sad.
It really is, because that's where Hugh Crane, the father, also made some really bad decisions. It was like they were on opposite spectrums.
Yeah.
But then when he tried to make it right, it was almost too late because Olivia had already taken like half their kids.
Yeah. I mean, that brings me back to when there was the mold in the wall. And I think it was one of the kids that told him, and he just like ignored it. And then when he finally went to address it, like he couldn't get rid of it.
Yeah. Now, the mold, I think, was a paranormal issue because there was the body behind the wall.
Yeah.
Ugh, poor Luke.
I know.
He was the one who found out.
Yeah.
That poor kid. He had it rough.
Mm-hmm. I think it just builds upon that Hugh, he was not the best decision maker in the family. He really wasn't.
No, I have this theory that Olivia and Hugh were meant to be opposites and that she was so sensitive and open to the house.
Yeah.
And Hugh acted like a void because even when things were in his face doing their haunting thing, to him, as if it just literally could not affect him.
Yes,
you know?
yes.
And for those of you out there who believe or experience these things, there are people out there who act as voids, who no matter what you tell them or what they can experience around them, nothing actually affects them.
Right.
It's interesting to see because I think that was what Hugh was. He acted like a void.
I think so. Like, I never really thought about it before, but I believe he was because he really did do those things. He would see it, right, as plain as day and, you know, just keep carrying on. And it's like, okay, that's how you
hire new contractors?
Yeah.
Like, it's not the contractor's fault, like, dude.
Okay.
Such a strange coping mechanism. Although Theo probably got the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Because Theo was sensitive and her mom, so beautiful and understanding because like got her the gloves.
Yes.
That was so great.
Her mom was really in tune with the kids.
Yes.
Really, really in tune with each of her kids.
Yes, which sort of makes her preying upon them a little bit sadder.
Yeah.
Because if Olivia had been in her right mind, she never would have done that.
Exactly. And because she was so in tune with them, she knew how to bring them back.
Yes. Oh, because for sure she used Nell.
Yeah.
For sure. Nell was how she got Luke.
Exactly. And she knew that by getting Nell, she'd get Luke.
Mm-hmm.
My heart breaks for Nell. Throughout the whole storyline and all the evolutions of Nell, because no matter what, she's always the caretaker and she's always wanting to care for those that she loves. And that really is her downfall.
Yeah. Although, talking more about Theo...
She was such a badass.
Theo was such a badass. Guys, Theo was so badass.
Yeah.
But I think that she was in some ways more powerful than her mom. Because she clearly had a mentalist type connection, but she also had that touch.
Yes.
So when she first is given the gloves, you assume that kind of puts a barrier between her and the metaphysical world.
Right. It's sort of like a switch. It turns it off.
Right.
Yeah.
But the more you watch the show, you come to understand certain scenes better, especially like the ones where each person experienced the Red Room differently.
Yeah. Oh, man. That was good.
It was so good. But Theo was the only one who experienced the Red Room, almost not in its full state.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
There was that one scene where Theo is in the Red Room and she's actually aware of the outside world.
Yeah, and she's sort of like, she's watching it from two different levels almost. Like she's in it, but she's outside looking in, right? Yeah.
And it does eventually bring her attention back into the room. But Nell was outside, I believe, the one who had the key and was trying to get in. And Theo, on some level, was aware that there was something wrong because the way that the young actress pauses and sort of, it almost looks as if she's coming to.
Yes, yeah.
I really, really like that.
I really like when she would see things, she would really see things. Yes. You know? She really was more in tune, I would say, than her mother, almost.
Yeah. Which is what saved her.
Yeah.
You know, in the end. I loved that she was a, social worker?
Yeah, she was. Because they had that one scene with the kid,
Yeah, that was so hard to watch. That was so good.
Oh my god, yes. Ugh. I think I stopped after that episode and was like, I need a break. Yeah. And I gave it a week and then I came back. It was really hard to...
I agree. I had to stop, I believe, halfway through that episode because I saw where it was going. I need to separate a bit from it. Yeah. But yeah, that was good. Definitely a trigger
and I think
warning.
because you always... Yeah, definitely a trigger warning. And you always thought with Theo that she was so detached from everyone. Mm-hmm. And then you saw that she really wasn't detached. Yeah. It was just what she wanted you to think.
Yeah, and I think the gloves were a great symbolism for that. Mm-hmm. Let's talk a bit about the groundskeepers.
Oh my gosh, the Dudleys.
So Mrs. Dudley, I feel, was a bit less abrasive in this adaptation.
She was. I think she was more nurturing for sure, especially with the kids.
Yes.
Which I wonder if there was ever thoughts on Shirley Jackson's part to include anything about the Dudleys before they were introduced with Eleanor and everything, because I wonder if the Dudleys would have been the same way with the kids from the Sanderson line, like previous, you know? Because she was very nurturing with the kids, even though, you know, yes, by dark, they're not going to be there. I think if the kids called, they would be there.
That's possible because she definitely had a different take with the kids because of their own child.
Right. Mm-hmm.
God, that house just really, and maybe not even the house, because I do believe it was Poppy who used children to manipulate mothers.
Yes.
Because Poppy herself was insane in that way.
Mm-hmm. I think if you took Poppy out of it, would there have been so many ghosts inside that house?
That's a good point, because I think that the house itself did consume the inhabitants on some level that was what the Red Room was for. The Red Room was like its heart and its stomach all in one. It definitely is where it feasted on them and drew them in. But Poppy was a massive catalyst to just how sinister the house was.
You know what? That plays into the 1990s film, because I believe the room where the carousel was also like the catalyst.
That carousel, that was the room that Nell danced in.
Yes.
Correct?
Yeah, she danced with her dad.
Yeah, and that sort of gives the illusion that that was a room that existed outside of reality.
In the movie, they never went into that specific room. Sort of like the Red Room was always locked away. They never got to go in there when they finally did. That was when, pardon my language, but the shit hit the fan.
Yeah, it's like a Venus flytrap.
Yeah.
You know? Like it had this like gaping maw of a trap. It definitely existed outside of the rest of the house, because I remember Olivia, the mom, talking about her personal library, which is what the room manifested for her to entice her. And was it the husband, Hugh, who was like, what library? No, it was one of the kids. The kids were like, what library? What are you talking about? In fact, I think it was Theo.
I think it was Theo.
Maybe that was why the room wasn't able to capture her completely, because Theo understood there was something about a space in the house that was not okay.
Because I think Theo was the one that uncovered one of the markings on the walls, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So Theo understood that house, I think, a little bit more than anyone.
Yeah, and I think that Theo understood it as it being a predator.
Yes.
Because Nell in the book and in even the 1963 movie, it seems like Nell understood the house as a lonely entity.
Yes.
Seeking companionship or comfort or...
Right, and she was that comfort.
Whereas in the Netflix adaptation, it was definitely a predator.
You know, I remember Theo protecting Nell and Luke a couple times while they were kids in that house.
Well, there was a scene, too, where Nell disappeared, or they thought she had disappeared during that really terrible storm that was isolated over the house.
Yeah.
And it was just the house's way of separating the family.
Yes.
They told the kids, stay together, stay here, but Nell immediately was not visible to anybody. And when they finally, quote unquote, found her, she cried and sobbed and said she'd been there the whole time. She cried and she screamed for them, and they didn't hear her or see her.
Which translated again when she went back to the house as an adult, and they were looking for her.
That's true. I always think of the Red Room as existing outside of space in a metaphysical sense, but it's almost as if the entire house itself was able to manipulate.
Yeah.
Ooh, because also when Nell, like, as a child, technically saw herself many times as the crooked neck lady.
Oh my god.
That was so sad.
That was so... When you finally realized it, you know, I was just in shock. And that still remains today one of my favorite episodes, because never in a million years would I have guessed that she was haunting herself. And it was just so fabulously done. Oh my god. Poor Nell.
I know. Because she hung herself in the library.
Right.
Off the spiral staircase. And there was a scene when they were still living in the house as children that they found their mother in that room. And she mentioned how sad it was that there were people who died, you know, in the house. And she was seeing her own daughter in the future.
Yes.
It makes me wonder, was that incident existing outside of time because Nell was being manipulated by the house? Or is it just the house itself is an unreliable narrator? You know?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, that would make perfect sense for the house to be an unreliable narrator, because it changes its position with each person that comes into it. So, for sure, the house is an unreliable narrator.
Yeah, and time has no meaning.
No, of course not.
No meaning there. The Netflix adaptation was so interesting and complex.
Yeah.
With all of the ways that they looked at different things and different coping mechanisms. It was
the psychology behind it was really, really, really well done. I love the way that they really got into each character, and how the house during that one summer influenced who they were as adults, but also the effects of what happened in that house, how it influenced what they did in adulthood. Because, I mean, we're going to talk about Steven. I mean, he was just the worst of the worst.
He really was. Before we get into that, I just want to mention that I had this weird thought that if in the book and in the 1963 adaptation, which were very similar, if the house was meant to be this lonely entity looking for companionship, then does that mean that Poppy was the one who drove it insane?
Ooh.
You know, because like one of the first first, like, quote-unquote companion it gets is this woman who is completely off her rocker.
Yeah.
And also views companionship in a very twisted, disordered way.
Yeah. It could be that the house just wanted a companion and the one that it got was not necessarily the one that it wanted and took this whole left turn. And it just...
It brings a different light into how the house views time and
Yeah.
space, too. Because if you're insane, your look and your view on reality is disjointed, is disordered. So maybe the house was driven insane by Poppy.
And then it fed off of that.
Yeah, that's kind of sad.
Oh, it is.
It's
I mean,
like really dark.
like, I wouldn't think that I would be empathetic to the house at all. And I almost am in a way.
Right.
Because you wonder if, like I said, if Poppy was just lifted out of there, what would have happened with the house, and would Olivia have really been taken in by the house?
Yeah. I mean, she may have, but she may have come to terms with it slowly over time.
Right.
Grow to love the house.
Yeah.
And want to be with the house as, like, a place to be and die and have that be their last home.
Yeah.
Versus a fixer-upper like they treated all their other homes.
Yeah.
But with Poppy in the equation, it drove her insane. And
that was a really good, like,
yeah,
you know
like,
what I
it
mean?
just made me think, like, because inanimate objects as entities are very interesting.
Yeah, and the influence that we have on them. Like, I mean, I could really, like, relate Poppy's influence on the house to, like, a lot of everyday life, you know?
And even homes in general, if they're, you know, not entities or whatever,
Right.
just like a normal home, it's very clear when a home has not been lived in. A home falls apart very quickly.
Yeah.
When there's no one there inside of it to keep it alive.
Yeah.
It's strange how fast a house will fall apart.
Yeah. Even a car. Like,
yeah.
I mean, when you're not taking care of it properly, it's falling apart.
The cars that get left in driveways
Yeah.
for just even a summer, rust sets in, tires deflate, and that is a very quick process.
Yeah.
When it's just a few months.
Yeah.
That energy, that interaction, that living and the entity
Yeah.
sort of gives it life.
Okay, let's get back to Steven.
Steven.
I mean, we've been putting it off. Let's go ahead and let's talk about it.
Ugh. So, are we going to talk about first how he preyed upon his own family or how he preyed upon strangers?
I mean, which is worse? They're both worse.
Right. And it starts off with us being introduced to him as someone who preys upon strangers.
Yeah. And he has no moral compass. Like,
No.
and for someone who experienced what they experienced, you would think that, I mean, I don't want to say that I would expect him to have been timid or anything, but I would have expected him to be more open to the feelings of others, including his family members, because of the way his mom raised him.
Yeah.
And it almost seemed like when his dad abandoned them, he took that to mean that that was a free-for-all. And he was just self-promotion. How can I benefit from my family's disaster and from your disaster? How can I benefit this? How does it help me?
Well, not just that. How can your disaster or grief a lot of times benefit me, but how can I further be dismissive to your grief?
Yeah, the way he oh my god. When that woman came in and she was talking about her husband, oh god.
From the get-go, I'm not sure if setting him up in the first episode made it to where I was unable to empathize with him in the end, when he sort of came around, but not really, because he gets to live and Luke doesn't, but whatever.
Yeah.
But getting to see him from the get-go, that he is not just self-serving over other people's grief, but he is completely dismissive and kind of belittling to other people's grief.
Right. And he alienates everybody.
Yes.
He really does. And I mean, yeah, he came around towards the end a little bit, but not enough for me.
No, the way he treated that poor woman in the very beginning who lost her husband, and the way that he kind of succinctly wrapped up her haunting, and then played it off as if, like, obviously that's it, and, like, there's no other explanation, and you should just, you know, get over it. Also, I'm gonna buy the rights to your story now, and that's it.
You know, for him to survive everything, I couldn't stand it.
Yeah. Especially since he, even in the worst throes of the last bits of the haunting, as Olivia attempted to reclaim her family in the means of Poppy for the house and all of that to have her family with her, that he still was kind of a dismissive asshole.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't blame Shirley at all for not wanting to have anything to do with him because, you know, she was well within her right to be that way with him. And I think that he just wasn't a redeeming character at all. He just really wasn't. He was there for the drama, get it.
You know, the only times I ever saw any humanity in him was when he interacted with Luke.
Yeah. Maybe that was his soft spot.
Yeah.
Was Luke Luke and maybe witnessing how bad things were for Luke, but like, why aren't you trying to help your brother? You know?
He kind of wrote him off as someone to pay off out of his limelight on a consistent basis.
Yeah, and it seemed like Stephen was one of those adults that we often see that's like, well, better you than me almost.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Ugh, Stephen. Because even like Hugh came around. Maybe he didn't make the right choice in giving up his kids. I mean, trauma can bring you together.
Yeah.
You know?
It can. It really can.
And why abandon the children to, one, figure it out on their own, but figure it out with a relative who had no context.
Yeah.
And had no context, but also sort of assume that you did murder.
I know!
Like, why would that be the person?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the auntie sounded great.
Right.
But still.
But almost like love you at an arm's length auntie. Yeah. You know what I mean? But yeah, Hugh did like redeem himself in the end because he came around and he realized his mistakes. And while I still feel like he wasn't 100% redeemed, I can be okay with how his character developed in the end.
Yeah.
Because he really did try at the end.
Better late than never, but also it was almost as if he brought peace to his wife.
Right.
You know? Which, after everything that happened to that poor woman in that house, and then just sort of live in that limbo time between them leaving the house and Nell coming back, where she was alone in this house. She was alone in this house with Poppy.
With Poppy, yes.
Of all people. Who drove her mad.
Yeah.
To have been abandoned for that long in that home. The least Hugh could do was to stay behind with her and ensure that she couldn't drag the rest of their children back with her. She seemed to have calmed a hell of a lot down.
Yeah. She really did, and I'm grateful to Hugh for doing what he had to do. Wish that he would have done it sooner.
Yeah.
You know, but I mean, at least in the end, he was there for his kids that were out and made it out, you know, because that's all that you can do.
Yeah, sometimes that is all that you can do. I would have preferred Luke to be the brother that had lived,
Same.
but I don't think Luke could have lived long without Nell.
I don't think so. I think that their bond was so strong from childhood. You know, they were so in tune with each other that there's a twin-tuition.
Yeah.
Like, they really had that I don't know that one could have survived without the other.
Yeah.
So I completely get why, even after sobering up and everything, and when Nell passed, fell back into his old patterns. I completely get it. And I wish he would have survived, wish Nell would have survived, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I guess the only kid I wish Olivia had taken would have been Stephen.
Yeah. I mean, he's just...
And there's no way she would have gotten Shirley. Shirley was too, especially after everything that happened, Shirley was too cut and dry, too black and white. Like, there's no way she would have fell, I don't think, to any of the traps of the house.
I don't think so either. I think Shirley had seen enough in her childhood and understood enough of what happened.
To set an example, too.
Yeah, to set an example and to be like, you know what? My mind is not going there. I will not allow myself to be tricked.
Yeah.
I think she fully recognized that, and she made an effort to not be influenced by the house or by her mother or anyone, really. You know, they had that one scene where she had the check from Stephen and she was like, no, I don't want that.
You know, I just realized we talk a lot about intergenerational trauma and that cycle, and she broke it.
She did. She really broke it.
Yeah. I mean, Theo tried, but I think that Theo probably went about it in ways that were not, like, Theo, because of her intuition, is not capable of fully breaking that cycle, which is out of her hands. But Shirley legit broke that cycle.
Yeah.
Shirley was gonna get out.
She was definitely an example for them on how to get out and how to make it in a world where you've suffered such trauma. Granted, some of the things that she did you didn't agree with, but at the end of the day, she did make it out of there, and she made it out of there with a lot of her mental capacities intact. She really did.
She really did. She wasn't the most memorable character.
No.
But she definitely was the most adjusted.
Yes, she was. And it's really funny to see how even Stephen, when you look at all the different characters, Stephen was very well adjusted, minus the personality stuff.
He was well adjusted at the expense of others.
Right, exactly. Shirley was very well adjusted. Nell was on her way, I feel. Nell was on her way.
Ugh, if she hadn't lost her husband or her fiance, that was utterly heartbreaking.
Yeah, Nell was on her way. Theo was just like, Theo is Theo.
Yeah, she was as moved on as she could be.
Exactly. I think Luke had it the hardest.
Yeah, Luke definitely. Luke had it the hardest, I think, because not only as the twin and everything that happened, I mean, his sister was the one who had the crooked neck lady. The only other boy in the family, Stephen, was not someone you could go to for comfort.
Right, and I think they often discredited what he saw, too, both Dad and Steven.
Yeah.
So you have no choice but to deal with it yourself as the baby, and how do you deal with it?
Yeah.
How do you deal with it? If something makes you forget, I see why you went to it, and it's just sad.
It is. It's sad. Luke deserved better.
Yeah.
Which is funny, because, like, Luke in his many adaptations started off as the liar.
Yeah. Yeah, he really, like, in the book you heard about him, you heard he was a liar, he really wasn't playing much into, like, the whole plot of the story, and then he came into the Netflix series, and he started off like that, but then you really got to see, as his character developed, that there were reasons why, and he was just so likable, and your heart just went out for him.
Yeah, aside from the way that Nell lost her partner, Luke is the one who broke your heart the most.
Yeah, my heart really broke for him. Yeah. I mean, I felt such empathy for him. I really attached myself to Luke, and I really wanted him to be okay, and I was really sad that he wasn't.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I personally struggle with finding empathy for people stuck in particular cycles of addiction because of my own family issues, but man, Luke was not only well written, but was acted in such a way that even his body language sold you on his issues and his rejection, his dejection, everything. It was just, I'm really grateful that we got to discuss how the story evolved.
Yeah.
Even the Netflix adaptation with the few maybe jump scares, because like there really weren't that many jump scares. They really
weren't. I think they tried to stay with the mental kind of thing because, like I mentioned earlier, a couple scenes and you're like, is that a ghost in the background?
Yeah.
And then it came out like in the news that they had hid like 300 ghosts or something inside the house. And so, yeah, there weren't as many jump scares as horror nowadays you usually get. You did get the creepy face with the crooked neck lady and Nell often screaming, yeah.
Which fair.
Yeah, you get it, so they played into that, but really it really focused on the like mental and making you really think about like, did I really see that? Is my mind playing tricks on me? And I really enjoyed that aspect of it.
Yeah, I did too. And that's one of the things that we will continue to talk about in this podcast as far as horror and media goes. Just the way that experiencing horror, relaying it to your own life experiences, being able to discuss it in depth.
Yeah, because I think horror is such a taboo subject, When you tell someone that you love horror, they kind of look at you funny.
Yeah. I think that people assume that when you say, oh, I love horror, they assume that you mean the gore, the slash. That's not it at all.
It's so much more than just death. I mean, and we'll cover other topics and other directors and films that explore different types of horror that can be just as scary as the shoot 'em ups and the kill 'ems and the serial killers and stuff. It's just, horror is so versatile and so
complex.
Yeah, so complex. That's such a good word to describe it. It's one of the better genres out there. Personally, for me, obviously.
For us, we are a little biased.
Yeah.
We're quite aware.
And I mean, I hope you guys really enjoyed listening to this and what our takes were from Hill House, because it was really fun to like compare. I've never really compared all of the adaptations before, and I really, really enjoyed seeing the similarities and the differences.
Yeah, and we're also hoping that as we continue to talk about horror and we continue to bring it out from the shadows of these very taboo conversations and hiding it from kids and hiding it from yourself, like not wanting to engage in it, that there's reasons to consume horror.
Yes.
There's reasons to engage with it and discuss it. Know your own limitations and your own boundaries. 1,000%. Don't be like the first Eleanor.
Yeah, for real. Don't go from 0 to 100 with the horror, okay? No. Baby steps. We're taking it from 0 to 1 right now.
Yes, exactly. But as you continue to learn and hopefully enjoy horror the way that we do, don't yuck a yum.
Yeah.
It's what we like, it's what we enjoy, and we get more out of it than just like a thrill.
Yeah, horror is so much more.
Yeah. If you liked listening to us ramble on about horror, subscribe to our podcast and tell your friends. And if you would like to follow us on social media, you can find us on Instagram or Facebook at LLOTL Podcast.
Check out our website by going to lastlibraryonTheLeft.com. Be sure to visit our About Us page to discover our 2 truths and a lie. Or, if you'd like to send us an email, you can reach us at somethingwicked@lastlibraryonTheLeft.com.